Have you ever imagined an entire community, men, women, children, vanishing without a trace? No bodies, no signs of struggle, just absence. Tonight, we travel back more than 400 years to the edge of the New World, where one of America's oldest and darkest mysteries began. This is the story of the Roanoke Colony, a settlement built on hope, swallowed by silence, and remembered only by a single word carved into weathered wood: Croatoan. Some say the colonists died of disease. Some say they were killed. Others insist they simply blended into nearby tribes. But what if the truth is far more disturbing? What if Roanoke wasn't a story of death, but of transformation? From the desperate footsteps of Governor John White searching for his family, to eerie diary entries, ancient rituals, mysterious stones, and modern science uncovering clues no one can explain. Tonight, we are going to follow the trail from past to present, from faith to fear, from humanity to something else. This is not just a retelling. This is a reconstruction of a haunting. So, turn down the lights. Listen closely, because the island of Roanoke may be quiet, but its story is still very much alive. The sea is unnaturally calm as John White's ship glides toward Roanoke Island, its bow cutting through a curtain of thick silver mist. For 3 long years, White has imagined this moment, reuniting with his daughter Eleanor, holding his granddaughter Virginia Dare, hearing the laughter of the settlers he promised to protect. But as the island's shape emerges from the fog, a tightness grips his chest. Something is wrong. The familiar shoreline is there, yet it feels hollow, empty, abandoned by life itself. The crew lowers anchor, and White steps onto the sand with a heart full of hope, but every step forward steals a little more of that hope away. The beach is undisturbed, like no one has walked it in months. No footprints, no smoke rising from hearths, no distant chatter or children running, just wind, just silence. He moves deeper inland, past a collapsed fence he remembers helping build. Grass and vines have swallowed the pathways, curling around the wooden frames of houses that should be bustling with life. Doors hang crookedly, flapping softly like dying breaths. Tools lie scattered, rusted by time. A cradle sits overturned in the dirt. White stops in the center of the deserted settlement, his breath loud in the suffocating quiet. He calls out, "Eleanor? Virginia?" His voice echoes back at him, unanswered. A shiver crawls up his spine. This is not the chaos of a hasty evacuation. This feels like people simply evaporated. Then he notices something. A small wooden post standing at the edge of what used to be the council house. At first, it looks ordinary, but as he approaches, the hair at the back of his neck rises. A single word is carved into the wood: Croatan. But this is not the clean work of a calm builder. The letters are jagged, uneven, carved so violently that splinters jut out like tiny teeth. The grooves are deep, too deep, as if the writer pressed the knife with desperation, or fear, or both. White traces the letters with his fingertips. The wood is scarred, almost trembling. This wasn't a message. This was a warning. He looks up slowly, scanning the tree line, his heart pounding. The forest stares back at him, dark and silent. In that moment, he realizes with chilling certainty, whatever happened here did not happen peacefully. And the deeper he goes, the more he feels it. A presence, unseen yet heavy, lingering in the air, as if the island remembers, as if the island is watching. The mystery has begun, but the island has more to say. And that night, it begins to speak. Night falls faster on Roanoke than John White remembers, as if the island is eager to plunge itself into darkness. His crew sets up a small camp near the shoreline, torches flickering weakly against the encroaching night. The men whisper among themselves, casting uneasy glances toward the tree line. Even the fire seems reluctant to burn, its flames sputtering each time the wind sighs. White tries to reassure them, though his own voice feels hollow. He can't shake the suffocating stillness of the abandoned colony. As the moon rises, pale and distorted behind drifting clouds, the forest begins to speak. At first, it's just the usual sounds of night: crickets, wind, the occasional rustle of leaves. But slowly, undeniably, something else weaves into the natural symphony. Whispers, soft, broken, almost human. White freezes, eyes narrowing toward the trees. The sound seems to drift around the camp, circling it like a predator testing its prey. His men stiffen, gripping their weapons, but none of them dare to speak. Then he sees movement. Between the branches, lit faintly by moonlight, silhouettes sway. Too tall to be animals, too thin to be men. They do not walk, they glide, slipping from tree to tree with a strange, distorted grace, like shadows that forgot how to behave like shadows. White's heart pounds, but he refuses to look away. Every instinct screams at him to flee, to abandon this cursed land, but he cannot. Not while Eleanor and little Virginia remain unaccounted for. Not while their faces haunt every heartbeat. One of the men breaks. "Sir, we need to leave," he whispers, voice shaking. "This place, it's wrong. We're not meant to be here." White's jaw clenches. He feels the fear in his men, but he feels something stronger in himself, a father's desperation. "We're staying," he says quietly, "until I have answers." A sudden gust of wind bursts through the clearing, strong enough to snuff out 2 torches at once. The air turns cold, unnaturally cold, as if something exhaled directly onto the camp. White wraps his cloak tighter around himself. The wind brushes past him again, not random, not natural, but deliberate, like a breath at the back of his neck. He turns sharply, no one there, but the feeling lingers, crawling across his skin. Around them, the whispers rise again, threading through the trees like mournful sighs or warnings. And through the veil of darkness, the silhouettes remain, watching, waiting. Roanoke has secrets, and tonight it feels as though the island itself is alive, breathing in the scent of the living, measuring the weight of their fear. White stares into the shadows, determination gripping him like iron. Something is here, and it knows they've returned. By morning, the echoes of the whispers still cling to White's thoughts. The island has given him fear, but not answers. Those answers lie hidden in the ruins. By midday, White forces himself deeper into the ruined settlement. He steps carefully through collapsed door frames and splintered beams, as though walking through the ribs of a long-dead beast. Each house feels like a memory, frozen mid-breath, faded garments still hanging on walls, half-carved toys abandoned in the dirt, chairs overturned as if their owners rose in panic and never returned. In what once belonged to a young carpenter named Elias Pierce, White pauses. Something feels different here. A presence, faint yet suffocating, clings to the air, like grief trapped inside wooden walls. The floorboards creak under his boots. Dust dances in a thin beam of sunlight, cutting through a cracked window. On the table lies a leather-bound journal, its edges brittle, its cover warped by humidity and time. White lifts it gently. The smell of mildew hits him, but beneath it lies something sharper, metallic. Blood? Decay? He cannot tell. He opens the diary with the caution of a man who knows he is about to read someone's final thoughts. The early pages are mundane. Notes about crops, weather, a small sketch of the settlement. But halfway through, the handwriting shifts. Lines grow jagged, uneven, as if Elias wrote with trembling hands. And then the final entries. The nights have changed. Shadows move on their own. White's stomach knots. We hear chanting from the woods. Not English, not Croatoan. His breath hitches. He remembers the whispers from the night before, the ones that wrapped around the camp like a warning. Eleanor says she saw a woman with white eyes near the well. The diary nearly slips from his hands. Eleanor, his daughter. What did she see? What terrified her enough to confide in Elias instead of her own father? He turns the page. It is smeared, dark, sticky, textured. It flakes beneath his thumb. Not ink, not fully dry, even after years. His heart races as he reads the last surviving line. If anyone finds this, we are not alone. The remaining half of the page is ripped away, torn with such force that the fibers are frayed like shredded flesh. White closes the diary slowly, fighting the rising panic. This was no sickness, no sudden migration. The colonists weren't simply afraid. They were hunted by something they could barely describe. The silence of the settlement presses down on him, heavier than ever. Whatever happened here wasn't a moment of chaos. It was expected, foreseen. And the colonists left behind their terror like fingerprints on every surface. White steps outside, clutching the diary to his chest. The wind stirs. For a brief, chilling second, the shadows beside the well seem to shift, as if something stands there still, watching him, waiting. He turns away quickly, but the dread follows. Whatever took the colony, they saw it coming, and it may still be here. With the diary's words burning in his mind, White realizes the island itself won't give him the truth, but someone else might. John White wastes no time. With the diary's final words burning in his mind, he seeks out the one place he believes might still hold remnants of the truth: the Croatoan tribe on a neighboring island. He remembers the alliance they once shared. He remembers Manteo, the tribesman who had traveled with him to England, who had spoken English with careful pride. But when White arrives with a small escort, the reception is nothing like before. The Croatoan village is alive with movement, yet an uneasy hush settles as the tribe notices the Englishmen approaching. Children are ushered indoors. Hunters retreat from the clearing. Even the dogs slink away, tails pressed low. Manteo steps forward, but the warmth that once lit his eyes has dimmed. There is recognition, and something else, something like fear. "John White," Manteo says quietly, bowing his head. "You have returned." White tries to offer a grateful smile, but desperation cracks through instead. "Your people. Did they see them? My colonists? My daughter? My granddaughter?" For a long moment, Manteo says nothing. He only studies White's face, as if weighing how much truth a father's heart can withstand. Finally, he gestures toward a small fire pit and motions for White to sit. The flames flicker low, casting trembling shadows across Manteo's solemn features. "They came," he begins. "Some months passed. Not all, just a few. They crossed to our island in the night, barefoot, wounded, their faces white with fear. White leans forward, gripping his knees. What did they say? Manteo's voice drops to a near whisper. They said the woods called their names after dark. Not in dream, not in madness. They heard voices, voices that sounded like their own kin, begging them to return. White shakes his head. Return where? Manteo points toward the distant silhouette of Roanoke Island, its dark mass looming across the water. They said the island wanted them back. A cold sweat prickles along White's neck. He imagines Eleanor stumbling through the Croatoan village, clutching Virginia, unable to rest, hearing something in the night calling her from across the waves. Why didn't they stay? White asks, voice cracking. Manteo's expression shifts, pained, haunted. They tried. We fed them. We sheltered them. But each night their eyes changed. Each night they woke at the edge of the woods, not knowing how they had come there. His voice grows tight. One morning, they were gone. All of them. They walked back into the darkness. We searched. Found no tracks, no bodies, no signs, as if the earth swallowed them. White stares into the fire, his throat tightening. The flickering orange glow blurs as his vision stings with tears he refuses to shed. What did they flee from, Manteo? What hunted them? Manteo shudders visibly, an expression White has never seen on the proud leader's face. We do not speak of it, he whispers, not even among ourselves. White's blood runs cold. He rises, shaken but determined. I have to go back. Manteo grips his arm suddenly, fingers tight with warning. White, the island knows you are here. The journey back to Roanoke is suffocatingly silent. Even the sea seems afraid to speak. As White and his men step onto the familiar sand, night settles like a shroud. The trees stand in stillness, their black silhouettes twisted against the sky. And then White hears it. Faint, stretched, almost human. John! He freezes. His men look around wildly, but none claim to have spoken. The voice comes again, drifting through the trees like a breath carried by the wind. John! His blood chills. Because this time, the voice sounds achingly familiar. Like a woman he once held as a child. Like a daughter he may never see again. Something on the island is calling him. John White's story ends in uncertainty. But the mystery of Roanoke does not end with him. Centuries later, new hands will dig up what the island tried to hide. Centuries pass. Empires rise and fall. But the land remembers. In the humid stillness of a North Carolina forest far inland, miles from where John White once walked, a modern archaeological team surveys the ground with drones and soil scanners, searching for evidence of early native European interaction. They expect shards of pottery, maybe trade beads, scraps of tools, nothing more. But what they uncover instead freezes every member of the team in place. Partially buried beneath a tangle of roots lies a stone, oval-shaped, heavy as sorrow, its surface carved with crude but unmistakable English letters. The markings are weathered yet legible, as if etched with desperate hands centuries ago. The team gathers around as the dirt is brushed away. One of the archaeologists stiffens. Wait, this writing, it's Elizabethan. Another bends closer, voice trembling. It can't be, not this far inland. But it is. And then they read it. We followed the voices we should not have. A chill sweeps through the clearing despite the summer heat. Birdsong ceases. Even the insects fall silent. The lead archaeologist feels his stomach twist. He knows these words shouldn't exist. Not here, not carved in stone, not after more than 4 centuries. And the signature at the bottom, though faint, is unmistakable. E.W.D. Eleanor White Dare, John White's daughter. The stone is transported to a nearby field lab where experts analyze every groove. Some claim it must be a hoax. Others insist the dialect, the carving method, even the mineral weathering, all point to authenticity. But the bigger question haunts them. Why inland? Why carve a message instead of running for safety? What force could drag settlers from the coast into the deep forest? And why does the stone feel less like a warning and more like a confession? As the excavation widens, the mystery deepens. First, they find pottery, decorated with symbols unknown to any documented tribe. Spirals, concentric circles, strange branching shapes that resemble twisting roots or spreading veins. Then come tools forged from materials that don't fit the era. Metals hammered with a technique no colony possessed, and adorned with markings that resemble both English runes and Indigenous script, yet belong fully to neither. But the most disturbing discovery lies in a shallow pit nearby. Bones, human bones, not arranged with care as in a burial, but scattered, mingled with broken stones and fragments of woven fabric. Some bear ritualistic carvings, shallow etchings running in spirals and lines that mirror the symbols on the pottery. One bone, belonging to a young woman, has a small circle carved near the joint, precise, deliberate. A scientist whispers, horrified. This wasn't just survival. This was transformation. The air grows heavy. The forest, once merely ancient, now feels alive, watching, waiting, listening. The Dare Stone, with its ominous message, becomes a puzzle piece too jagged to fit into the neat narrative of American history. It suggests something unthinkable. The colonists didn't just vanish. They moved inward, guided by voices only they could hear. And whatever they followed left marks on both their bodies and their minds. Science now has bones, artifacts, and a stone that speaks. But the more it uncovers, the stranger the story becomes. The Dare Stone sparks a storm of academic debate, but it is only the beginning. Within months, research teams descend upon the region, digging through soil layers untouched for centuries. What they find forces science to confront something it has no vocabulary for. At first, the evidence seems straightforward. Signs of famine, interrupted food storage pits, cracked clay ovens. The colonists clearly struggled, but then the anomalies begin. Deep in a climate-controlled lab, skeletal remains lie arranged neatly on metal tables. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. White-coated researchers move with tense precision, murmuring in clipped tones as they examine every bone fragment. One scientist adjusts her glasses, scanning a femur under magnification. No lesions, no pitting, she mutters. Nothing consistent with plague, smallpox, or dysentery. Another researcher lifts a rib bone. This colony should show a signature of mass illness, but these people didn't die of disease. It should be a relief, but instead confusion grows, followed by dread, because some of the bones are wrong, not diseased, not damaged, altered. A young intern steps back from a table, face pale. He points to a tibia with trembling fingers. Look at this. It's expanding. That's not even possible. The bone displays a subtle but undeniable distortion, as if it began forming new ridges, new shapes, new density, as if responding to something internal, something changing them from the inside. Geneticists are brought in. They sequence fragments. They repeat tests. Every result is worse than the last. It's not malnutrition, one expert says, swallowing hard. It's not environmental. She hesitates, lowering her voice. It's adaptive. Adaptive to what? They have no answer. Rumors spread through the academic community. Some claim the colonists blended with multiple tribes, producing hybrid traits. Yet the bone modifications are too rapid for normal evolution. Others whisper about psychological breakdowns, groups driven by shared hallucinations into ritual transformation. But hallucinations don't reshape bones. A fringe biologist publishes a paper that is immediately ridiculed and suppressed. It suggests the colonists encountered a biological anomaly, a pathogen or organism or environmental force beyond known science. He describes it as a catalyst that alters human physiology, rewriting the body as if preparing it for something else. His paper is removed within hours, but not before it circulates in underground forums. And now, even the most skeptical researchers feel it. The evidence is pointing somewhere terrifying. One night, long after the official teams have gone home, a solitary researcher examines a skull fragment beneath the dim lab light. Her breath fogs slightly in the chilled air. There, on the inside curve of the bone, is a faint spiral groove, shallow but deliberate. Not a natural growth, not carving, a pattern. She steps back, whispering to herself. Something changed them. The lab feels colder. The shadows seem to shift. And the question no one wants to ask hangs in the air. If something altered the colonists, is it still here? But science is not the only keeper of memory. Long before the labs and scanners, another group had already told this story, in whispers by the fire. Far from the coastal ruins of Roanoke, deep in the wooded hills of North Carolina, lives a small indigenous tribe whose numbers have dwindled, but whose stories have not. Their language has shifted with time, yet one legend has survived, passed down in whispers beside firelight, spoken only on nights when the wind moves strangely through the trees. A tale of visitors, a tale of transformation, a tale of the pale-skinned people who arrived long before the world was ready. For generations, the tribe's elders have protected this story, not as superstition, but as memory. It begins with strangers emerging from the forest one autumn evening, thin, barefoot, their clothing torn from travel. Their skin was pale as moonlight, their eyes hollowed by hunger and fear. The tribe offered them food, shelter, warmth. It was their custom to aid those in need. But quickly, something felt wrong. The strangers never truly rested. Even in sleep, their faces twitched with unseen terror. Their lips moved as if answering someone or something in dreams. Children of the tribe told their parents they heard the newcomers speaking to the trees. Hunters reported seeing the colonists wandering at night, barefoot in the frost, staring silently into the darkness as though listening for a distant voice. One evening, a young mother found one of the strangers standing knee-deep in the river, eyes open but unseeing, whispering a single word over and over in a voice not her own. Another night, a boy followed one of the colonists into the forest. The man walked deeper and deeper without hesitation, thorns tearing at his legs. When the boy called out for him to stop, the stranger didn't turn. He simply vanished into the trees. The tribe searched for hours, then days, never finding a trace. Not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing, not even disturbed underbrush. It was as if the forest swallowed him whole, and he was only the first. One by one, the pale strangers disappeared. No screams, no signs of struggle, just footsteps leading into the woods. That abruptly ended. When the tribe gathered their elders, the oldest among them spoke a phrase that chilled even the bravest warriors. Not lost, but transformed. The tribe understood this not as death, but as migration into another state of being. Something beyond the human body, something older than the land itself. As years passed, the story was dismissed by outsiders as folklore, an embellished tale of early contact between tribes and settlers. But the tribe never forgot. The elders insisted the strangers did not simply merge with the community. They changed, leaving behind something unseen but permanent. And then, centuries later, modern science stumbled onto what the tribe had known all along. As part of a genealogical study, DNA tests revealed patterns no one expected. Markers linking several members of this small indigenous group, not to later European settlers, but unmistakably to the earliest English colonists of Roanoke. Eleanor's people, White's people. Their bloodline lived on, but changed, reshaped by something the colonists encountered before joining the tribe, or before disappearing altogether. Historians scrambled to explain the findings with tidy theories of assimilation, but the tribe shook their heads. Assimilation alone does not explain the whispers, or the sleepwalking, or the disappearances, or the spirals carved into old bones. Nor does it explain why some descendants claim to hear faint voices when they walk the forests alone. Voices calling from deep within the trees, in a language they do not recognize, yet somehow understand. The story of the tribe makes one thing chillingly clear. The colonists didn't die. They didn't vanish. They changed, and their transformed descendants walk among us even now. The land remembers. And so do they. Now, with legend, science, and artifacts all pointing in the same direction, researchers begin to see the shape of something much older and much darker. Months after the modern investigations began, a new team specializing in forensic document restoration takes custody of Elias Pierce's fragile diary. The ink has faded, pages warped by humidity and time. But technology has a way of resurrecting what the human eye can no longer see. Under normal light, many pages appear blank, torn, stained, or erased by centuries. But under UV light, the diary comes alive. Faint marks emerge, shadows of sketches drawn in haste, their lines sharp and erratic, ink bleeding as though the writer's hand trembled uncontrollably. What begins as curiosity soon becomes dread. In one set of sketches, Elias draws trees arranged in a perfect circle, their trunks leaning inward like silent witnesses. At the center lies a mound of stones, piled with unnerving precision, as if marking an offering or a boundary. On the final sketch, a shape spirals outward from the mound, a symbol carved in jagged strokes, a symbol no tribe in the region ever used, a symbol not found in English lore, a symbol that appears in multiple artifacts unearthed near Roanoke, marked into pottery, etched onto bone, scratched into wood. A spiral, always a spiral. Its lines loop inward, tightening until they vanish into a point, a void. Archaeologists trace it repeatedly, trying to decipher meaning, but every explanation feels inadequate. The spiral is not decorative. It is not random. It is instructional. A researcher flips back to Elias's entries, voice shaking. The nights have changed. Shadows move on their own. We hear chanting from the woods. We are not alone. Could these sketches be related? Evidence suggests yes. The deeper the experts dig, the more the pieces align into a chilling pattern. The colonists didn't simply fear something in the woods. They prepared for it. They participated in something. Some scholars begin calling it the shadow ritual. Others scoff, until they compare Elias's drawings with carvings from the artifacts found inland. The same spiral, the same mound, the same circular alignment of trees. A pattern repeated across space and time, as if reenacted, as if learned. One anthropologist studies the placement of the stones in Elias's sketch and whispers, "The geometry, it's intentional, it's old, far older than the colony, older than any known settlement here." Another points out that the colonists in their final days may have imitated a ritual already practiced by something or someone on the island long before their arrival. But the sketches hide a darker truth. On one page, nearly invisible until enhanced, Elias depicts human figures standing around the stone mound. Heads bowed, arms raised, bodies bending in unnatural positions. Their shadows stretch long across the ground, but the shadows are wrong. Too long, too twisted, too many joints, as if the shadows weren't theirs. This page sparks panic inside the lab. If the colonists attempted a ritual, the intent remains unknown. Appeasement, protection, transformation, no interpretation is comforting. And then one grim theory emerges, whispered by a linguist who transcribes the chants referenced in the diary. The colonists may have believed the ritual would save them, but it demanded a sacrifice. Survival came with a price, one the colonists either misunderstood or willingly paid. The more the experts analyze Elias's drawings, the more certain they become. Roanoke was not abandoned. It was consumed by something ancient. And the colonists tried to make a deal with it. The spiral symbol becomes the centerpiece of the investigation, a dark reminder that the colonists may have stepped into a ritual they thought would protect them, but instead marked the beginning of their transformation. Evidence piles up. Bones, symbols, stories, sounds. And from this chaos, a single terrifying idea emerges. By now, modern researchers no longer argue over whether something strange happened at Roanoke. The debate has shifted to what form that strangeness took. The evidence, diaries, bones, symbols, legends, DNA, refuses to fit into any conventional timeline or historical explanation. Instead, it forms a single, chilling mosaic. One that suggests the colonists' fate is far more disturbing than disappearance. It suggests transformation. In a high-security research facility, a team of historians, geneticists, and anthropologists stand around a large illuminated table. Every piece of the Roanoke puzzle is laid out before them. Spiral symbols printed on aged pottery, scans of altered bones, transcriptions from Elias Pierce's diary, and the dare stone glaring up like a spoken confession. One researcher summarizes what they all fear. We're not studying a vanished colony. We're studying a metamorphosis. For years, the most accepted theories claim the colonists either died from famine, disease, or violent conflict, or blended peacefully with the Croatoan tribe. But the evidence now points somewhere far darker. Theory 1. Assimilation into tribes, but not fully human. Some scientists still cling to the idea that the colonists merged with Croatoans or other indigenous groups inland. But DNA studies reveal anomalies, markers that do not match any known indigenous lineage or English ancestry. They appear altered, not random mutations, not disease-driven, directed. Adaptive traits, one geneticist mutters under her breath, like something in the environment reshaped them. But reshaped them into what? No one can answer. Theory 2, a nomadic offshoot with changed physiology. Archaeologists tracking the Dare Stone's inland path propose a second theory. The colonists may have formed a nomadic faction, moving deep into uncharted forest, becoming something between a tribe and a myth. Reports from centuries-old oral histories speak of pale wanderers, figures who appeared at dusk, hair long and tangled, eyes dark and reflective like animals. They never spoke, never traded, never approached. They watched from the trees, then vanished. Some tribes believed they were ghosts. Others believed they were something that used to be human. Theory 3, the island didn't let them leave. But the most terrifying theory doesn't come from science. It comes from the land itself. A folklorist from the research team reads aloud from a Croatoan elder's testimony. The island chooses who belongs. Once it whispered their names, they could not run. This aligns disturbingly well with Eleanor's final warnings, the tribe's accounts of sleepwalking colonists, and Elias Pierce's frantic diary entries about voices calling from the woods. And then the lead historian says what everyone has been avoiding. Maybe the colonists didn't leave Roanoke. Maybe Roanoke took them. A heavy silence floods the room, because this theory suggests a literal physical merging, a communion between human body and environment, between flesh and soil, between voice and forest. Bones found near Roanoke show mineral changes consistent with long-term exposure to something. Not disease, not starvation, but an environmental force capable of altering biology. A force old enough to predate tribes, predating even the earliest settlements. A force perhaps tied to the spiral symbol found etched everywhere. In this theory, the colonists did not assimilate into a tribe, nor did they simply become nomads. They became part of the land. Their shapes changed, their minds shifted, their identities dissolved into something older than human history. The voices everything traces back to this single phenomenon. The voices Eleanor wrote about, the whispers colonists heard in the night, the names called across the forest long after the colony fell silent. For years, historians called them hallucinations. Now, acoustical researchers analyze recordings from the forests around Roanoke. Strange frequencies, echoes without source, harmonics too structured to be natural. They match no known animal or human pattern. One expert reviews the spectrogram and whispers, horrified, its speech, distorted, layered. It's trying to say something. The team replays the sound, and faintly, beneath the static of leaves and wind, they hear it. A drawn-out syllable, a name. Not an illusion, not hysteria, a call, just as Eleanor described, a call home. Suddenly, the transformation theory becomes more than speculation. It becomes the only explanation that binds all evidence. The colonists didn't flee the island. The island reclaimed them. But long before theories and spectrograms, one man stood on that shore and watched his hope drift away. John White stands at the shoreline, the wind tearing at his coat, as if desperate to keep him on the island a few moments longer. His boots sink into the damp sand. This same shore where he once imagined greeting his daughter Eleanor with open arms, where he once dreamed of holding his granddaughter Virginia Dare for the first time. But the island has offered him nothing. No bodies, no clues he can accept. Only whispers, shadows, and a single carved word that feels more like a curse than a message. His ship's crew calls out to him, urging him to board. The tide is rising. Storm clouds gather on the horizon with unnatural speed, as if the island itself is pushing him away. White hesitates, his heart fractured beyond repair. "I'm sorry," he whispers to the empty settlement behind him. Sorry for leaving them. Sorry for failing them. Sorry for not understanding the terror they faced. He steps onto the ship's gangplank with the weight of a man burying his own hope. As the vessel begins to drift from the shore, he forces himself to look back one final time. And then he freezes. At the edge of the tree line, half shrouded in shadow, stands a small figure, barefoot, still, pale as moonlit sand. The child holds something cradled against her chest, a soft scrap of faded fabric fluttering gently in the wind. A baby's blanket, Virginia's blanket. White's breath catches violently in his throat. His knees buckle. "Virginia!" The name escapes him in a trembling whisper. The figure doesn't respond, doesn't move. She only tilts her head slightly, as though studying him with quiet, ancient curiosity. Not the eyes of a frightened child, but something older wearing the shape of one. White reaches out a hand instinctively, helplessly. "Please, please come forward." But the girl takes a single step back, then another, and with eerie grace, she slips into the darkness of the trees, swallowed whole as though the forest has been waiting for her. "No!" White cries out, voice raw and breaking. He tries to leap toward the railing, but sailors grab him, pulling him back for his own safety as the ship continues drifting away. All he can do is watch the island retreat, inch by inch, while the place he once dreamed would be a home becomes a grave of questions. He collapses to his knees, grief hollowing him from the inside. He will die never knowing the truth, never knowing what his daughter saw, never knowing what his granddaughter became. Centuries later, tourists walk the reconstructed paths of Roanoke, unaware of the weight beneath their feet. Guides tell stories of the lost colony, but their voices never mention the unease that settles on the island at dusk. The hour when shadows stretch long and the wind carries whispers that do not belong to the living. Visitors report seeing a girl, small, quiet, barefoot, standing at the forest's edge, her dress pale, her eyes unreadable, her presence fleeting. Some swear she clutches a piece of cloth, worn smooth with age. Others say she watches them with a solemnity no child should possess. A few, those who wander too close to the tree line, claim they've heard her speak. A single word, soft but unmistakable. Home, not a plea, not a warning, a claim. Because the truth of Roanoke's disappearance does not rot beneath the soil. It does not sleep in the past. It breathes, it watches, it waits. The colony is not lost. It is alive, woven into the land, into the trees, into the very shadows that move when no one is looking. And some say that on the coldest nights, if you stand very still, you can hear the island whisper back, calling out to those who once belonged, and to those who one day might. And so, more than 4 centuries later, the lost colony of Roanoke may not be lost at all. Maybe they didn't vanish. Maybe they changed. Maybe they're closer than we think. In the soil, in the stories, in the blood of those who still hear whispers when they walk alone through the trees. Was it starvation? Was it disease? Was it ritual? Or something far older than any prayer? We may never know. But one thing is certain. The island remembers. If you ever visit Roanoke and you feel a chill in the air when the sun begins to fall, if you hear your name carried softly on the wind, don't be too quick to call it your imagination. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it calls you home. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of history, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. What do you think happened to the Roanoke Colony? Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and listen carefully to the things you can't quite explain.